I would like to thank everyone for being here today. We are going to have a ton of fun. And hopefully by the end of this, you're going to learn a little bit more about Zentangle and you'll be able to make more of these creations on your own. So for starters, my name is Caitlin Wismer and I am going to be your instructor today. We are going to be creating these awesome Zentangles. So by the end of this, you're going to have a mini version of this that if you want to make more of, you can. So I'm going to hold that up. And we are going to get started. So I'm going to switch over to my other camera now so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, if you can see my hands now, can you just give me a thumbs up? Perfect. Okay, so like I said, this is what we're going to be creating. You should already have a 3 by 3 inch piece of paper, a pencil, and a pen. I'm going to be using a Sharpie for some of this just because it'll be easier for you to see. If you have one of those thin tip Sharpies, you could use it as well, but a pen will also work. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our 3 by 3 inch piece of paper, and in each corner, we're going to put a dot with our pencil. So I'm going to put a dot up here, one in the bottom, one over, and one in the top. So you should have 4 dots in each one of your corners. And you can either be doing this along with me, or if you feel more comfortable just watching it and then going back and doing this later on, you can as well. So we have our 4 dots on our paper, and now we're just going to connect them to make our border. So I'm just going to draw a line from one to another dot. And then we're going to have a frame. And it doesn't have to be a perfect line either. Okay, so now we should have a nice little border around. And when I see everyone's heads pop up, that's going to let me know that we are ready to move on. Okay, so we have our nice little border around. Now we're going to make our compartments for each of these different patterns to go in. So the first one that we're going to make is we're going to start about halfway down on the left side, and we're going to draw a line that kind of has a little bit of a curve to that. And like I said, this one doesn't have to be perfect either. Everyone's is going to be a little different, and that's what makes art awesome. So where that line ended up here, we're going to draw a line straight down the middle. If you want to be straight or have a little bit of curve to it, you can as well. Okay, and then our last line that we're going to make is we are going to start right where that bottom line ended, and we're going to make one more curve to it. So yours should look something like this, and it should have 4 compartments for us to draw in now. The reason why this is called Zentangle is because if we actually turn it this way, we actually made a Z for all of our compartments. Okay, so the first one that we are going to create is this top one right here called the crescent moon. And I'm going to switch over to my Sharpie, but right now you can switch over to your pen. So we will not need our pencil anymore. We will just be using our pen, or if you have one of these nice fine tip Sharpies, those also work great as well. Perfect, I see some of you have them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw little half circles spread out all around just this part, just this border. So I'm going to spread them out just a little bit. Everyone's is going to fit a little bit different amount of them. Some of you might have more than me, some of you might have less. It's all just going to depend on how big you make them. And once you have all of those created, you're just going to color them in. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but we want them colored in as best we can. So let's all take a moment to do that. And Zentangle is supposed to be very relaxing, so we don't want to rush during this. So if there is a time that when we're creating that you need a couple more minutes, just raise your hand and let me know, and we will take some more time to work on our drawing. We definitely do not want to feel rushed. Coloring my last one in. If you're still coloring though, please take your time. Yours should look something like that right now, kind of like ladybug dots. Okay, I'll give you a couple more minutes. Yep, you can take some time. So Zentangle is all about kind of relaxing and focusing on the patterns that we're creating. So if you were to create something a little bit bigger than this one, it would take this one would take about an hour to do. And that's why we're doing this one for a half hour. So you can imagine if we made a really, really big one, how long it would take us to create it. Okay, so as we are finishing up that, if you are still working on that, please spend some more time coloring that in. For those of you that are ready for the next step though, I am going to show you the next part. So as you see on this one, I have my colored half circles down, but they all kind of have a little dome around them. So how we're going to do that is I'm going to pick one of these to start with. It doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to make a dome around it just like that. Then I'm going to move to the one next to it and I'm going to make a dome. And I'm going to keep doing that around until all of my colored in circles have a dome around it. Okay, once they all have one dome, we're going to keep adding domes. So I'm going to go back to the one I started with, and I'm going to put another dome around it. Then I'll move to the next one and make another dome. If you run into it, like right here, I don't have a full space for a full dome. That's okay. Just make a half dome. They don't have to overlap each other. They'll just stop right there. So some of my domes will just be half domes, and that's okay. Then when I'm back to the beginning again, I'm just going to keep making domes all the way around until that middle space, there isn't room to make any more domes. So I'm going to go around and you'll notice that your domes are going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. In this middle part I have right here, I can't really make a whole lot of domes. So I'm actually just going to color that in. So it kind of is like the entrance to a cave. And if we're looking down, this is the entrance. So I'm going to give you a couple seconds to finish that up. And when I see your heads up, we will move on to the next step. Now there is a way to shade some of these so they kind of look like 3D. I would like us to get through all of our 4 patterns. And then if we have time at the end, I'll show you how you can shade them a little bit to make them pop. Okay, so can everyone give me a thumbs up if you feel like this one is good and you can move on to our next one? Perfect. Okay, so the next one that we're going to do is we are actually going to hop over to this space and we are going to be creating, this is called a knight's bridge. It looks like a checkerboard a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do to create that is we're going to basically make a grid. So I'm going to make lines going this way all across my paper. We don't want to make them too close to each other because it's going to make really tiny spaces that are going to be hard to color in, and we're going to take a lot of time doing that. So spacing them out a little bit is a good idea. So once you have all your lines going vertically, you're going to make your lines going horizontal. And you kind of want them to spread out a little bit as well. If you want them to have a little wave to them, you can. If you want them to curve a little bit, or if you want your lines to be straight, you can as well. It's totally up to you. So yours should look something like this. You can either go with more of a curved line or a straight line. And just like we did with this one with coloring in, we're going to color in different spots to give it that checkered board pattern. So I'm going to start right here, coloring this one. So if I color in this one, then this one is going to be white. And underneath it, this one will be white, and this one will be colored in. So we get that checkered pattern, and I'll leave that one there if anyone needs to look at that. So take a couple minutes and we're going to color in our checkered pattern. The reason why we don't use really thick markers for this is since Zentangle is supposed to be kind of relaxing and we want to take our time doing it, if we use a really thick marker, before we know it, it's done, and we don't get to spend as much time coloring it. If you wanted to, you could always use a colored marker that has a thin tip, or even different colored pens would be very cool. It would definitely give it a different look than just the black and white. But my hope is that by the end of this class, you'll have some knowledge that you can create your own Zentangle and you can make it your own. So today we're just learning 4 basic patterns, but there's actually a ton of patterns online for Zentangle. Some of them are kind of easy to do, and some of them are a little bit more tricky. So we're learning what I call the basics of Zentangle. But if you like this, it could be something that later on you look at more of the tricky patterns. You'll also find that there are people that create different animals or figures or shapes, sometimes even fruit, out of Zentangle patterns, where maybe they make an owl, but instead of adding feathers to it, they do this really cool crescent moon pattern for it. So that is definitely something to look into as well. If you have any uncolored spaces, you can always go back over them. Okay. So yours should look something like this. Yep. Do you have a question or you need some more time? More time. That's fine. And I've seen what some people do even with this is instead of leaving these spaces white, sometimes they add a pattern in that as well. So if this is something that you like to do and you decided to create your own one, you could always play with the pattern within a pattern a little bit more. Okay, Leah, did you need some more time? Yes, okay, that's fine. Kara, did you have a question?
Yeah. Can I go and get a charging cord for the computer?
Yeah, go right ahead. We'll be here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is probably our biggest space, and the bigger spaces will take us a little bit longer. What's kind of cool about Zentangle as well, even though we're drawing on it this way, when we're done with it, we're able to pick and choose which one is the bottom. So when we're finished, we're going to be able to kind of move it around a little bit and see which one we think is the best bottom and which one we think is the best top. And it's going to be more of a preference. So for this one, I decided that this was the way that I liked it the best, which is kind of cool because once this is finished, you can't even tell that we have a Z in it. Okay. Are we ready to move on to the next one? Perfect. Okay. So the next one, I'm going to move it back around so we can see, is we are going to do this line work, and it's kind of overlapping. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick anywhere in this space and draw one line. And I'm going to make it touch from this to this side. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line right next to it so it looks like it's a thicker line. Okay. Then I'm going to add another line that interacts with this one. One thing that we want is if I draw a line here, it's going to stop right where that line starts, and it's going to pretend like it goes underneath it and touches our other corner. Then I'll draw another line right next to that as well. So our lines that we're making, when they get to another line we created, they're going to stop and start next to it. Think of it if you were weaving something and going through, it would go under that space. So this area right here, you're just going to fill with different lines. You could make a curved line. You can make straight lines. You can make a wavy line as well. So just take a couple minutes and fill this space with different lines. Now we do want to have some background still, but we do see a lot of space that I can still fill in with different lines. So go ahead and take some time to do that. Just remember when you get to another line, it might go through two lines. You just want it to go underneath. And if you accidentally go over a line, it's okay. Or just learning this. Add another curve. And you get to decide how many lines you think this space needs. Maybe you think this space needs a ton of different lines. Maybe you just want a couple. Maybe you only want super wavy lines or only curved lines or just straight lines. You get to kind of decide that, which is a fun thing with Zentangle. So right now, I think I'm just going to add one more wavy line because I really like how those look. And then I think my space is going to be good for me. You'll notice in this one that I created, I went over it a couple of times to make lines look a little darker. If you want it to show that a line is on top of another line, say like this one, I could go around the sides and make it darker to show that it's on top of the other lines. If you like that look and you want to make some have darker sides while others are finishing up, you can, or if you like just how the lines look without any type of shadow to them, you can leave them like that as well. So I'm actually going to make this one have some thicker sides to it, because this one is actually the first line that I created, so it is on top. And I think I'm going to do that to this curve line up here as well. And how thick you make the lines is truly up to you as well. Okay. Going to give you a couple more minutes to work on that, and then we are going to work on our last pattern. I think this line one would be really cool if when you were finished with it, if you colored them different, the lines different colors to kind of make them look like string that's been woven through. Maybe this is a zoomed in picture of a sweater that we're seeing under a microscope or something like that. I mean, think about all these shapes. We kind of see them places, but maybe they're zoomed in. So maybe that would be a cool way to think about each of these patterns, that they're a zoomed in image of something under a microscope. Okay. How do we feel about this one? Are you ready to move on to the last one? Okay, it looks like we are ready to move on. So our last one is going to be the spiral pattern. Just like how this one we didn't overlap any of the lines, or this one how we didn't overlap any of the domes into another dome, we're going to do that same with our spiral. So in this space, I'm going to create a spiral, just like that. And then around it, I'm going to create another spiral. You can make these bigger, you can make them smaller, or they could all be the same size. So the important part is if I make it super close to this one right here, whenever I go to spiral around, I want to make sure that my line isn't going through the spiral I already made. Instead, we want to pretend that it's going underneath it and it's coming out on the other side. So this one is overlapping this one, but the lines are not going through it. And that's what we're going to do for this whole space. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes and we're all going to work on these little spirals. Now I've seen some people do really tiny spirals and then they'll put a really big spiral in. And I've also seen where people decide to make them all the same size. So I just made a really big one. Maybe I'll make a super, super small one next to it. If you do decide to use a thin tip marker, the smaller ones are a little bit harder to do than the medium or big ones, just because your marker likes to kind of bleed out a little bit and create more of a thicker line. So I'm going to keep filling in. And soon enough, you're going to get these really tiny spaces right here that don't really seem like they're going to fit a whole spiral. We're going to pretend that there's a really small spiral that's way underneath this pile of spirals. And I'm just going to add a couple lines to it to make it look like there is a spiral that's super, super low below all of these ones. So any small space where it doesn't really seem like a spiral would fit, just start it off with the small part of the spiral and then add lines around it to make it look like the spiral is in fact there. So I have a couple little more spaces. I can go back. I need to add another spiral somewhere. And this was a pretty small space to fill a spiral. If you were to go and let's say you created a Z on another piece of paper and you did these 4 patterns still, they would look different depending on what space you would put them in. So the ones that we have domes over in our spirals, those were in the 2 smaller spaces. I wonder what those would look like if we put them in the larger spaces. Same with this checkerboard pattern as well as our line pattern right here. They would look drastically different if we put them in different spots. So it doesn't look like we're going to have time to show you how to add the shadowing, but I am just going to put these right here and talk you through how I would add shadowing with just a regular pencil that I have. That if you would want to add the shadowing after this, you would have the ability to. And if you're still working on your spirals, you can keep doing that. So with the dome one that we first started with, remember we said that we put a little cave opening at the very beginning? all I would do is right where that cave opening is put a little shadowing over that, shading over that with just my pencil. And then I would just kind of smudge it with my finger to make it look not so harsh of a line, to make it look soft. If I would do any shadowing on my checkerboard pattern, underneath the colored in parts, I'm going to make it look like they're popping up a little bit by just adding a little bit of shading there and smudging it with my finger as well. For our line section, to make lines look like they're popping up from below, that they're on top, we could add just a darker line around them. Or if we want to add some shadows too, all I would do is on this side of my line and on this side of my line, I would add some shadowing and just smudge it with my finger to make it soft. I don't have to do that to every single line that I see. I could pick and choose. Maybe there's a line that I definitely want at the top, and maybe I don't put shading on one to show it's at the bottom. That's completely up to you. And for this one over here, there isn't a lot of shadow options that you could do. You could add a little bit on the spiral center or the outside, or maybe I shadow in this one with my pencil to give it some shading and smudge it to show that this is in fact below this one right here. You'll notice also with this one, I have really tiny places that I just could not fit any spiral in, so I colored them in. When you're looking at your spiral creation, if there's a really tiny spot, like I have one right here, that I just can't fit a spiral in, I can just take my marker or my pen and I can color those in to show that even though these spirals are all overlapping with one another, that there is some space underneath it, that they do end somewhere. So that is also an option. So the last thing that we need to do is, like I said, when you're finished, go ahead and start spinning your image around and see which side you like the best. Do you like having the crescent on the bottom? Do you like it on the right-hand side? Spin it around and decide which way you think, if you were to frame this and put it on the wall, that you would want it to be hung that way. Okay. When you decide that, in the bottom right-hand corner, I want you to sign your name. Every artist always signs their name. That way, anyone that sees this work knows that it's yours. Okay. And the last thing that I would like to do is I'm going to have my friend bring me back so you can see my face. And I would like us to look at our creations. You do not have to show your creation, but if you would like to, I'd love to see it. So if you do, you can just hold it up to the camera. Oh my goodness, those look amazing. Oh, we're spotlighting right now. That's perfect. Oh, I really like how dark you got your lines to be. Wonderful. Oh, and yours is very lovely too, Leah. I like how you put diamonds for your checkerboard when you turned it. Very awesome. Perfect. Okay, we're going to bring the spotlight back to me. Wonderful. So today we have created our Zentangles together. I hope that you had so much fun with me. I know I did as well. And like I said, you can look up different patterns. If you decided this is something you really like to do, you can keep creating these on your own. And with that, I hope that we get to see you again for maybe one of our virtual summer camps, or if we do another free event, that you'll be able to join us. So thank you everyone for coming, and I hope that you have a great 4th of July weekend. See ya.